Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. It has been a very long time since I've made a video, so I am hopping on today to kind of give y'all a little bit of a life update. If you're new here, this is all pretty much new information to most of the people that have been here anyways, so you didn't really miss much. I'm not going to go into all aspects of my life right now, just this main one because it's going to be a long video. But first I'd like to say excuse my face. My cat attacked me at the vet the other day. She was stressed out. It's not her fault, but it gave me like black eyes right here and then this big old scratch on my nose, but we're healing, so it's fine. Anywho, today I wanted to discuss with y'all my and my husband's experience so far with infertility because it's been ongoing now for almost 3 years. I have kind of like made a timeline list of everything that we've done, everything that we've been through, just to catch us up to where we are now because we're kind of in a new phase of this era, and I wanted to bring y'all along with me through that, whatever that entails. So it's best that I give you all a little backstory because I haven't talked about everything on this channel. I know that I've mentioned infertility before, but that's been a while now. So let me get my notes ready. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the backyard. She just be doing the most. Okay, so in 2022, I went to paramedic school and I graduated in the spring of 2023. So around April of 2023 is when my husband and I started trying because I knew that like my clinicals would be over, my graduation was approaching, and so if I got pregnant, it wouldn't necessarily interfere with any of the school stuff that I was doing at that point. So let me check. I have literally been tracking my ovulation since February of 2023. So I guess in April is when we really started like paying attention to it. I started tracking my ovulation because I knew we were coming up on a time that we would start trying, and I had never done it before, so I just wanted to see what was up. So I started tracking my ovulation. I wasn't doing basal body temp. I did for a little period of time. I don't even remember when that was, but it wasn't for very long. I was getting positive ovulation tests during this time. We went throughout 2023 with no results. It was an interesting year in my life. Both of our lives, I guess. I was teaching at the college and then teaching at the high school, so I wasn't making a whole lot of money. So there really wasn't anything else for us to do. We just figured we would keep trying and try not to stress about it, as everyone says. So then in January of 2024, I started a new job at a plant and was making a lot more money. Had a lot-ish. I don't want to say I had more free time because I definitely did not have more free time. But we were more financially secure again, so I started planning all my doctor's appointments that I had been putting off because of XYZ reasons up until this point. And I don't necessarily know who it was exactly that we talked to that referred us or like recommended us try out a fertility office in our area, but on May 28th of 2024 was our first consultation with the fertility specialist. And going into it, I was very optimistic because we'd already been trying for over a year at this point and nothing had happened. I've never had a positive pregnancy test in my life up until this point, and so I was hoping that they would maybe look into possibly like endometriosis because I felt like I had fit all the criteria with heavy bleeding and cramps and all of that. So first thing they wanted to do was kind of just see where we both were. They did a bunch of blood work on both of us, and that was on June 11th. Then on June 27th, we had a follow-up where everything came back relatively normal. I can't remember. I don't think anything was off. So then on July 3rd of 2024, my husband did his first semen analysis. I have dates. I don't really know if that matters, but just if y'all are looking for a timeline of events, this is how things went for us. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my point of view on this. I can't really give his. If you're looking for like the husband's experience through all of this, unfortunately, I can't speak for him. I can try my best to explain to you what I felt or like what I think he went through or did, but I don't know. So semen analysis, what we did was we paid for the Protex cup to be sent in the mail. It would come in the mail. He would provide a sample at home, and then within a time frame, bring it into the office. They would send it to Houston, and then there they would perform the analysis of it. So about 2 weeks later, we have our follow-up, and that was just mainly because our doctor was busy. The results come back the same day, but we didn't get them, so we had to wait for this appointment. And this appointment was like nerve-wracking for me because I didn't want anything to be wrong with my husband, and I'm sure that he felt the same way. But we were also on family vacation, so it was like we had to stop what we were doing, go inside, get on the computer, and like get ready for this appointment. And it turns out that my husband had low morphology, which if you don't know what that is, it's like the shape of the sperm. So they could have 2 tails or 2 heads or no tail, like, and not be moving like they're supposed to and things like that. So according to our facility and everything going forward, like doses of medications, levels, things like that are just through our facility. So don't compare it to yours. It's probably different everywhere. But our facility wanted his morphology over 4%, which I think is the standard according to Google. But I don't know. Like I said, it could be different. My husband's was at 1%. The standard, it should be above 4%. Everything else was pretty normal, so we started looking into ways to increase this, and our doctor put my husband on the Theralogics, I think is what it's called, like vitamins, and it was like 4 a day. You take 2 in the morning and then 2 at night, and my husband had a really hard time with those just because he doesn't take medications daily, so he only took them if he thought about it or if they were right in front of him, and taking 4 a day for him was a lot. Like I said, considering he didn't take medications every day at that point. That's how that appointment went. So from there, the next step that they wanted to do was perform an HSG procedure on me, which is where they flush your uterus and your fallopian tubes with iodine and watch it under an x-ray to make sure that everything is clear. This was, I guess, like my doctor's initial time looking into the possibility of endometriosis, and now I can provide my experience with this because I went through it. So we had to go to a different location than our like home location because our home location doesn't really do a whole lot besides like monitoring and general appointments. So there really wasn't any preparation for this. I just had to they just advised like take 800 of ibuprofen beforehand. And of course I stressed myself out reading up on this stuff prior to, because everyone's talking about how painful it is and this and that. And like, because I had already suspected endometriosis, I'm like, oh man, this is probably gonna hurt. But like period cramps hurt, so it can't be that bad. So we get there, we sign in, and my husband and I are both sitting in the waiting room, and they call me back to do my pregnancy test because you have to do that beforehand. And from there, they just took me straight to like begin the procedure. So you undress from the waist down, and they put you on this bed, which looks like it's kind of in like a surgical suite. If you have been in a cath lab, to me it was almost like that because the x-ray machine that moves around. And they put you in the stirrups, but they don't put your heels in the stirrups. They put the stirrups like under your knees, so your legs are like way up in the air and you're scooted all the way to the edge of the bed. And I was a little nervous, but I was like, it'll probably be fine. Like I was really trying not to stress myself out at this point because I knew that was only going to make it worse. So they inserted the catheter, which you can't really feel. It's a little bit of discomfort. And this is my point of view. This could be different for other people because I've had bad experiences with a catheter insertion later on. So I know that it can hurt, but this time it did not. But once they started flushing the iodine, it was the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. And to be fair, I haven't broken any bones or like been through any major injuries, but that was the worst pain I have ever felt in my entire life. It was like this visceral pain inside that you almost couldn't pinpoint exactly where it is because it hurt so bad. And I was like gripping onto the bottom of the stirrups, like the poles that the stirrups are attached to, because I didn't want to yell. I don't want to be the patient that seems overly dramatic or anything, so I was trying to like keep myself calm, but they could tell that I was really tensing up, and they asked me if I wanted to stop. But at that point, I was like, just finish what you're doing. I don't want to have to come back and do this again. Just do what you got to do, and I'll be fine. When they started pushing it again, I almost passed out. It was probably because I was vageling. I was like tensing up, but I've never felt anything like that before, and it is not anything I want to experience ever again. So that was not fun. I don't think they really told me anything while I was in there, and I had been trying to watch it on the screen, but because I was hurting so bad, it kind of pulled my attention away, and I couldn't pay attention to it anymore. But after that, I just, like, and the cramping and stuff does pretty much stop, like, that severe pain, once they stop pushing it and once it like clears your tubes and stuff. But I was still a little crampy on the way home. So, and the procedure only takes like 2 minutes, but it feels like the longest 2 minutes of your life. So I get up off the bed, I go waddle to this room where I can get dressed again, clean myself up, put on a pad because they said that you can bleed afterwards, and obviously the iodine has to come back out. And then I go walk back out to the waiting room, and my husband's like, oh, when you go back for your procedure? I'm like, it's already done. He was just shocked that it happened so fast. So we get back in the car, we go to pull out of the parking lot, and I'm driving because I'm a kind of a control freak, and it's just better that I drive. And I'm like, that was the worst thing I've ever felt in my life, and I almost passed out. And he started freaking out, but I reassured him that I felt better, but that I never wanted to do that again. So that was my HSG experience. So then from there, that was on the 8th. On the 14th, we had our follow-up where they explained to us the results of the procedure. And they said that I did have flow through both of my fallopian tubes, but it was slowed significantly on the right side and kind of like dribbled out a little bit on the left, but there was flow through there. They also tell you that like for the first 3 months after this, you're more likely to get pregnant just because it can kind of like clear stuff out or whatever. But that obviously didn't happen. That was in August of 2024. They wanted to try to do an IUI in September, but I was going to be in Disney the week that my period started, and it just would have been too much of a hassle for me to have to find a pharmacy there to get my meds sent to start that whole thing. So we put that off for a month, but we still had hope that we would get pregnant because it was after the HSG, and they said that things were supposed to be cleaned out. But unfortunately, at Disney, I started my period, and I had a really embarrassing experience happen while I was there where my pad had unstuck from my underwear and was like tenting out the back of my dress. So that's fun. Not only was I not pregnant, but I was also embarrassing myself. And like that was kind of a bummer because that was, to me, our last chance before we had to start doing procedures and things like that. And also that was my first time really ever going to Disney, so I was going to buy a souvenir if I found out I was pregnant while I was there, and obviously I didn't. So that was a big bummer. So the 20th of September of 2024, we did a genetic screening, which was required by our fertility office to do any fertility procedures, IUI, IVF, etc. I don't know about like the timed intercourse or any of the at-home like monitored things, but at least for IUI and IVF, we had to do genetic screening, which was expensive, but I want to say it was only, I don't know, maybe like $325 for the both of us. I have no idea. I don't recall, unfortunately. But just keep in mind that if you do it, it's pretty expensive because they changed companies, and that company, after this one that we saw the first time, it was like $325 per person. So keep that in mind. On October 1st, we had our virtual follow-up with the geneticist, and I think that you only have to do that if something comes back abnormal. And I'm not a carrier for any of the like 300 diseases that they tested for, but my husband is a carrier for one. It's some sort of like not uric acid, but some sort of like acidic condition that you can have, but most people don't find out they have it till they're an adult, and it causes all these neuro problems. But luckily he's just a carrier for it. So for our child to have the disease, I would also have to be a carrier for it. So luckily to me, that was pretty much like cleared us of anything. Nobody's worried about it. Now that I was back from Disney, we were ready to start prepping for our IUI. My animals are going to knock over my tripod. And the way that our facility works is that by day 3 of your cycle, all of your fees and stuff have to be paid. So I started my cycle on the 1st of October, and the fees just for the IUI, not including the medications, was $1,995. The medications were obviously separate because you have to buy them from a fancy pharmacy. And those were, I think, almost like $650, if not more than that, because we paid almost $3,000 for our IUI. And that, the meds don't have to be paid by day 3, but you need them at a certain point, so we just paid it all at once. So I started my period on October 1st. And now I'm just going to kind of go through my treatment calendar with y'all so you have an idea of like how my IUI went. On October 2nd, day 2 of my period, I'm just going to say day whatever because my period started on the 1st, so that's like whatever day of the month it was. Day 2, you go in for baseline blood work and a baseline ultrasound just to see how things are going. Oh, I also forgot to tell y'all. At the very beginning when I had blood work done, I think they also did just a normal vaginal ultrasound. And they said that I had over 20 eggs on each ovary. Everything looked normal. Forgot to put that in there. Day 2, they do baseline ultrasound to look at all your follicles, and then a baseline blood work to make sure everything is like where it should be. Day 3 through 8, they started me on letrozole, and they started me at what I think is the highest dose. It was like 7.5. They come in like 2.5 increments, and I had to take like 3 at a time. And it actually was difficult for me to get this medication from the pharmacist because they asked me like what I was taking it for, and I said fertility treatments, and they said, well, you're not supposed to take this if you're planning to get pregnant or you are pregnant. And I was like, well, And that's when I found out that it wasn't technically approved by the FDA for fertility, but they gave it to me anyways because I was going to cause a ruckus if not. So I took the letrozole for those days, and then on the 11th, you go back for the same thing, blood work, ultrasound. They're trying to see how many follicles are growing because I guess at a certain point they won't do the IUI because you could run the risk of like having quintuplets or something wild. So everything was on track. Then the 14th, I went back, did another monitoring appointment and blood work. Everything looked good. I had like 2 dominant follicles and one that was like smaller than those, but still pretty big. So technically I had about 3 follicles at the time of my IUI. So that day 14, I also started estrogen, which just says estrase 1 tablet by mouth 3 times a day. So I don't know how much was in there. But I also triggered that night. So what my doctor did was 2 Ovidrel shots, which are 250 micrograms each of HCG. So I triggered that night. I have a video of my close friend and my husband doing them for me because, not that I didn't think I could do it myself, but I kind of like wanted it to be like, I don't want to say a group affair because she's just my friend, but I wanted Adam to be involved in some way, and then Lindy's a nurse, so she wanted to also be involved just to say that she was. So we triggered that night, and then 2 days later on the 16th is when we did our IUI. So we got there a little before 7. Adam provided a sample, and then it takes about 2 hours for them to do the wash and like prep the stuff for the procedure. And I don't really think, besides not having intercourse prior to this, there really wasn't a whole lot that they advised against, besides just like basically to pretend that you're pregnant, don't smoke, don't drink, don't do all that stuff. So after the wash was done, they bring you in a room, and it's basically like they just put that little catheter in again and put the stuff in, and then they put like the A team inside and then the B team on the outside. But for this analysis, because they give you the results of what they got like pre and post wash, everything was jacked up. I mean, not everything, but like It was odd to have seen such a huge change from July to October in all of his numbers, and I think there was just miscommunication on when the last time a sample was provided was supposed to be, so I think that was part of the problem. But after they put it in, they make you lay there, kind of in Trendelenburg, like with your legs up-ish, for about 15 minutes, and then you get up and you drive home, and you spend the next 2 weeks in pure horror waiting to know what happened. And I tested out my trigger shots because it is HCG that you're putting in your body. You have a positive pregnancy test, and I did test those out, and I felt like it was taking a really long time for the line to completely go away, which was kind of frustrating because I didn't want to get my hopes up that I was pregnant, but at the same time it was almost like, how could I not get my hopes up when my tests aren't changing? 11 days past trigger, 9 days past IUI. What's next? 12 days past the trigger shots, 10 days post IUI, I still had a line. So to me, I was like, what is this? That's when they tell you to test. So I guess maybe I could have had a chemical, but I didn't get any more positives after that, and it was already so faint, it probably just timed out. That was my experience with IUI. One thing I will say is the estrogen gave me raging headaches, like some of the worst headaches I've ever had in my life, and they tell you to pretend you're pregnant, so I was just taking Tylenol, and that wasn't touching it. So one day I was like, I can't take this anymore. I took Excedrin. I don't think that ruined the whole thing for me. It might have, but who's to say? And we're this far past it, so whatever. So we did the IUI on day 16. On day 18, I started progesterone suppositories, 400 milligrams a day at night. And then I continued the estrogen and the progesterone until I was told to stop them by the doctor's office. I'm pretty sure I stopped them. I just stopped them when I had my period. I just had my period like normal. I didn't really throw it off, I don't think. So that was in October. In November 24, we went on vacation for our 3-year anniversary. Menace. And we went to Tennessee, and we got a cabin in the woods with a hot tub, and we just decided to say F it because why not? And we spent like 3 days in the hot tub, even though I know they advise against that, but we just didn't care at that point because it had already been like a year and a half of trying, and the IUI failed that we just spent a buttload of money on. It was very frustrating. So we went on vacation, went about our business and whatever. Didn't worry about it in December, obviously didn't get pregnant in December. And then in January of 2025, that was the next time that I was able to enroll in benefits for my job that I was working at. I started it the January before, but because I've always been on my husband's, there was no need for me to feel like I needed to have 2 forms of health insurance. So it's something that I had to wait and at the time of starting the job, I didn't know we were going to do fertility stuff, so I didn't enroll. But then once we started looking into it, we found out that I was eligible for fertility benefits through that insurance. So I enrolled January of 2025. And that's kind of when we really wanted, we always the whole time wanted to get pregnant, but I was like, I'm not messing around anymore. I'm getting real sick of this. We're going on 2 years. We got to figure something out, and we have fertility benefits, so let's just do what we got to do. So January 29th of 2025, Adam did another analysis, and it was the worst one so far. Everything was off. The numbers, motility, morphology, every aspect of it was bad. And not he's 100% infertile bad, but it was not good. There were multiple areas that were concerning. And it was at this point that we had talked with our fertility doctor and let her know that he was having difficulty taking the medication. And she advised us to start taking these gummy vitamins, Luminary. And so we started those because it's just one vitamin and does the same thing as all the other the pills we're doing, and it's just 1 a day instead of 4. So he started those. We got his results on the 4th of February from the 29th of January. When we got those results, we had gone in for a follow-up just to discuss next steps anyways, and it was at this point that him and I had already talked and agreed, let's just do IVF because we have fertility benefits, and like she's not willing to look into me any further. His stuff isn't getting any better, so we may as well just go for IVF, which luckily the doctor at that point had agreed, like, let's just stop messing around and just do that. I did have the benefits, which was like $25,000 in lifetime for procedures and like 10,000 lifetime for medications or something. And I know in the grand scheme of things, that's like one round of IVF. But that's what we had to work with. And there was a bunch of other stuff too. I had talked to a nurse on the phone that went over all of it with me. But because of what we were intending to do, like we were going to do frozen transfer, we were going to do PGTA testing, just because I felt like if we were going through all this, I would much rather like know that the embryos that we're implanting or that we're transferring are good quality. And the problem is that we still had a deductible to meet. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, we had to meet our family deductible. So before any of that insurance could even cover anything, just the out-of-pocket stuff, because some of our be covered by insurance regardless, it was like $9,900 or something, like 10 grand. And we didn't even have that in our savings. So we were like, okay, we'll put it off a month. We'll save, try to get our tax return back, see what we're working with, and go from there. Well, one thing after the other happened. We saved up enough money, but just never got around to actually doing anything because it was just never the right time to like initiate the treatment. I was miserable at my job. I wanted to change careers, and so we just didn't end up ever doing IVF. So in like June of 2025, I quit my job, so I lost my fertility benefits and started a new job. Started going back to school and just went about life. It was still the same thing. I really spent a lot of 2025, like after that point, just trying to not care because everybody says, oh, don't stress, oh, don't worry, don't care, blah, blah. So I really tried to do that, and I stopped tracking my ovulation for quite a while because I felt like that's simply the only thing that I could be stressing about. Because in the back of my mind, there's times maybe you don't understand, but in my brain, there has been times throughout this whole process that I'm like, you know what, it's okay if we don't have kids. Like everyone else around us has kids. There's plenty of children to be around, and I kind of enjoy having the freedom to just do whatever I want at any point. And so I kind of gotten back to that point where it was just like, whatever, I'll test every month if I want to. Some months I didn't even test and just let my period come. And then September 29th, 2025, I got up the booty crack of dawn, getting ready for work. It's like the day that my period's supposed to start. And I took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. So, of course, because I can't keep a secret or anything, I go wake up Adam, and he had like a golf tournament that day, so he was getting up soon anyways, but I woke him up, and his eyes don't adjust very well to like light and dark, but I like held up the thing, and I was like, do you see the line? And he was like, it's faint, but it's there. And that's the first time that I've ever seen a line that he has also seen. Usually I just have line eyes and I see a line on everything. But he saw it, so I was like, oh my god, like this is legit. If Adam can see it, then it's really happening. And so then I remember looking at the dog, and I said, what am I supposed to do now? Just go to work? And obviously, she just looked at me. And I did go to work. And so then I called my doctor when I was at work because I was on Strattera and Wellbutrin, which is I use for like depression and then like ADHD. I'm pretty sure both of those you're not supposed to be on when you're pregnant, so I called to tell them that I had a positive test, even though I hadn't seen them in months or talked to them in months, and to ask them about my medication. And so I got blood work scheduled for the 1st of October. And I was still testing every day, multiple times a day, because I'm a maniac, and like I had never seen a positive test outside of like my trigger shot, so I just wanted to keep looking at it. And so my first day of labs was on the 1st of October. My HCG was 62 and my progesterone was 8.3. So this day they said your progesterone's a little low. We want you to start taking progesterone. So they had me order the suppositories again, which were like $325 for a month's worth. And I think they were supposed to be 2 times a day. I don't remember. But they didn't come in until Friday, which was the next time that I had my blood work done. So obviously, if you know anything about TTC, you know that, or just being pregnant, your HCG should double like every 48 hours. So I needed like 128, 124 as my next number. So I go back Friday, my number is 147, so it's doubled. But my HCG dropped down to 6.33. So I like panicked. My meds came in that day. I made my husband bring them to work because I was worried that put one in right then, like something bad was going to happen. So that was a Friday. I started doing the progesterone suppositories. And then Monday, the 6th, I went back and my HCG had dropped to 113 and my progesterone had gone up to 10.43. And it was at this point that I kind of understood what was going on and that I was most likely having a chemical. But obviously they don't want to say that until it's like proven. So on Wednesday, I went back, my progesterone was, or my HCG was 28, and I had stopped taking my progesterone 2 nights prior because I was cramping a lot, I think. Anywho, I had stopped taking it whenever my HCG went down, so in 2 days, my HCG went from 113 to 28, and my progesterone went 10.43 to 0.77. And then a week later, I went back to confirm that my HCG was 0 and it was less than 5. So we had a chemical pregnancy in October, and that was a really big bummer because obviously it was a bummer. I'm just sad because I would be due in a few months if I was still pregnant, and I don't want to linger on that for too long because it's depressing. But anywho, that was my last blood work was October 15th. And then on November 13th, we had a follow-up virtual appointment where we discussed like next steps, because at this point, I think partially part of their reason of not pursuing like further tests and stuff was just because I had never had a positive test. And now that I had, they wanted to explore different avenues on why I could have miscarried. Yes, it's a chemical, but it's still considered an early miscarriage. I've given myself a lot of grief over the 2 things, but I was still pregnant at one point and then I wasn't. Regardless of how far along I was, it was still upsetting. So take that as you will. So they wanted to do blood work, they wanted to do a saline sonogram, they wanted to do another semen analysis, but they wanted to check for DNA fragmentation to see if that was part of it. So we scheduled blood work and a saline sonogram. And I did that on the 26th of November. And while I was, like, when I went to get the saline sonogram, they put in the same little catheter I was telling you about earlier through your cervix and into your uterus. And I don't know if she just did it too fast or didn't realize, but I guess she could have, like, hit the back of my uterus or something. I don't know, but it hurt. Like, I gasped, kind of, but tears immediately came to my eyes. And I didn't say anything else, but they were like, oopsies. Must have just hit the back of your uterus. And I was like, please don't do that again. Because I had been stressing myself out about this because it's similar to an HSG. Obviously not the same, but similar. And I had had so much pain with the HSG that I didn't want this to hurt also. So I had already been trying to like calm myself down, and that was not a great start to the procedure. But anyways, they just flush out your uterus with saline while they do an ultrasound to check and see if there's anything anatomically incorrect in there, anything abnormal. And they didn't say anything while they were doing it, obviously. And when I sat up after the procedure, I kind of look over to the monitor and I see something in what was my uterus on the screen. And I didn't say anything because I know they can't tell me. But the nurse practitioner that was doing it said it's probably just artifact. But it looked too, I don't know what artifact on ultrasound looks like. I know what it looks like on an EKG, and it looks all crazy like. So I assumed that artifact on ultrasound would also look crazy like, and this was like a uniform like ball in like coming off of the edge of my uterus. So of course I go to work after and I ask our radiology, or like our rad tech that also does ultrasound. I'm like, if you saw like a cyst or a polyp or something in someone's uterus, like what did it look like? And then I gave her the explanation. She was like, oh yeah. So I kind of knew we were kind of working with that, which was a bummer because I was like, dang, that puts off like doing anything else, because I know they try to like remove them before you get pregnant just in case, whatever. So that was the 26th of November. The 15th of December, we had our follow-up. All of our blood work came back normal. Adam's DNA fragmentation was like 8%, so that was good. And all of his numbers are significantly better, like above average, and then his morphology is still at 2, but 2 is better than 1. Because that had been 3 in a row that had 1%, and now we're at 2. So we're slowly starting to improve. But it also took me until late in 2025 to realize that the reason his last analysis was probably so jacked was because we had been in the hot tub for 3 days in November. And it takes like 3 months for them to like completely regenerate and stuff if you kill them all off in the hot tub. So just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. But everything looked good for him. But for me, they said that they saw a lot of stuff in my uterus. And so they recommended that they could either go do a hysteroscopy, where they just look inside my uterus and like take out the polyps as needed, or they could do that plus a laparoscopy, which is what you do for like endometriosis. That's how they diagnose you. They go in and actually look. And so I was like, well, considering I had been trying for the last year to find someone that would do a lap for me, because I was convinced that Adam's morphology wasn't the only problem with our fertility, and I couldn't really find a doctor I trusted. So I was like, let's do that, because I really feel like that is part of my diagnosis, and you have yet to confirm or deny that information. So we scheduled that for the 30th of December, and I went in, I think it was like a week after my period. Yeah, because the 15th of December I started. So for my surgery, you have to be like MPO, like don't eat or drink anything like after midnight. My procedure wasn't until 2 the next day, so I was starving. But I went in and they do all your paperwork and consents and stuff, bring you to a little pre-op area. They gave me by mouth some gabapentin, Tylenol, and Phenergan, which the gabapentin was for anxiety, Phenergan was for nausea, and then Tylenol was just for pain. And I guess that was just like standard pre-op according to them, and I wasn't going to turn it down. So they brought me back. I don't really even remember them bringing me back because the CRNA came and talked to me, because I was mainly just worried about being intubated because I'm a paramedic and I'm usually the one intubating people, and it freaked me out to think about. But she was super chill, super nice, and pushed my Versed on the way back. So I was a sleepy girl, woke up in recovery, and I was shaking so bad. Like I wasn't cold, like shivering, but I was just shaking. And I remember the post-op nurse kept putting blankets on me and putting them on me, and she had one like draped over my head, and I could barely talk because my mouth was so dry. And I was kind of nauseated, but not super nauseated. But I remember being like, water, like SpongeBob, and trying to like chug the water but not go too fast, but to be able to tell her like I might need a nemesis bag. And joke's on me, she didn't even give me a puke bag until we were leaving post-op. So if I had thrown up, I would have just thrown up on myself. But anywho, I was pretty out of it afterwards, and I just remember her giving me my bag of clothes, telling me to get dressed, and then like leaving. And the room like was just closed with a curtain, so obviously if I needed something I could have like yelled out. But I thought it was odd because I was not stable enough to be standing up and doing all that jazz. But oh, they also gave me an estrogen shot in my booty before I left. And then on the way home, I remember I'd be singing, and then just wake up, and I was sleeping with my mouth wide open. I slept so good on the way home. But I can do a whole nother video on that experience if you'd like, because there's just a lot that goes on with that. But I did a post-op, or like a post-op appointment 2 weeks after, so on like January 14th, and we went over everything, and she said that they did find endometriosis. My right tube, the one that I had issues with in my HSG, was twisted and adhered to the back of my right ovary, and 30% of my left ovary, which was less than my right, was covered in endometriosis. So they got that, and then my uterus and my bladder were also adhered to each other, so they took care of that. And then when they got into my uterus with the hysteroscopy, there were so many polyps that they just did a full D&C and like cleaned everything out. But that everything else had gone well. So that explains part of the reason that I feel like my cramps have always been so bad on the right side. And like, it was just finally, it felt good to know that I was right, that I had endometriosis, and that so many people did not listen to me. And now it's confirmed, like, and clinically diagnosed. It made me feel so good. So then, of course, you have to take a few weeks off from that before you can start trying again, but they also say that you're more fertile after that. But my procedure was on December 30th, and I didn't have a period until February, a few weeks ago. So I didn't have a period after, and they said I could skip one. So I randomly started just doing OPKs just to see if I was going to ovulate at any point, and I did ovulate on February 6th. I forget what I called them for. Oh, the fertility office called me because the doctor had also spoken with us at the follow-up about enrolling in a clinical trial that would cover our IVF, and they had called me for something regarding that, and I told them that I had ovulated, and so they wanted me to come in for blood work to check my progesterone and see if I actually ovulated or not. So I went in on the 10th of February, which would have been 3 DPO, and they drew my blood and told me that my progesterone was low and that I needed to be on progesterone. So that was on a Monday. And I still had progesterone left over from my chemical, so I was like, I'm going to use that. I'm not buying anymore. And then that Tuesday, the 7th, I got a call from the fertility office saying that we met all the criteria for the clinical trial, but that I needed to provide like a normal PAP from the last 5 years, and my one last year was abnormal, but I didn't know to what extent. So I was like, great, I'm going to have to schedule another one before we can even apply for the clinical trial. So my friend that gave me the shot with the IUI is in nurse practitioner school right now, and she's doing her like clinicals at the OBGYN's office, and she recommended me the lady that she's shadowing right now, and said that like they deal with this kind of thing all the time, and that if I just wanted to kind of get a better idea of like what I could be doing minimally while I'm in nursing school, then that she'd be able to give me an answer. So when I called to schedule my PAP, they said that I had mine in June of last year, so I wasn't due for one. And so I was like, well, I'll just go in and talk to the nurse practitioner anyways and like see what could be going on. So I ended up getting a packet printed from my fertility office of my entire chart, which it wasn't my entire chart, but there was some stuff in there. And brought that with me to my appointment, which they didn't have time to look over, but I basically gave her a rundown of like this whole thing I've been telling you for the last hour, and she was shocked, to say the least. She asked me if they had looked into any like PCOS, because whenever I first had my ultrasound done, they put on my chart consistent with PCOS, and then when I'd asked for a follow-up on that, they wouldn't give me any answers. My AMH was like 7.8, which the nurse practitioner said, that's shocking. And then it went down to 3.8 within a year. And she was like, that's also shocking. Why did it change? And my fertility doctor was not interested in like figuring that out. Basically, my fertility doctor just wanted to do fertility treatments, which is fine. I get it. That's the business. But I guess going into it, I saw it as they're going to fix all my problems and find out everything that's wrong with me. And they just didn't have any interest in doing that. But I also think that we could have started off a little more conservative, you know? That's now after I know what I know. And to be fair, during this whole process, twice I had gone to the gynecologist for my annual appointment. And the first one, she said, we had already been trying for a year, and she said, just have intercourse on the day that you ovulate for 3 months, and then you can come back. And then I found out at this most recent appointment that she got fired because she was very dismissive of people's problems. And then 2025, I had gone in June for my PAP, and I had brought up getting endometriosis surgery, and the midwife said, well, if your fertility doctor thought it was that big of a deal, they would have already done something about it. And that was the end of that. So, and I was just trying to get a referral to someone. So, like, I have tried to just kind of go back and go through my gynecologist, but obviously I have been met with walls through that as well. So, finally, this nurse practitioner is like, I'm going to give you your last 2 PAPs, because my last one was a little bit abnormal, but it wasn't like precancer or anything. It was just a little infection. And then my one before that was normal. She's like, here are these for the clinical trial, but if you decide that you don't want to do the clinical trial, I have a plan. And at this point, I had already been thinking that I didn't really, I don't know, clinical trials, I love science, and I would love to like be part of science, but I don't know all the details. They didn't give us a lot of details. They just said, enroll in this and it'll pay for your fertility treatment. You don't know like what the negative effects of that are going to be. And when I was on the medication for my IUI, it made me a maniac, like a psychopath. So I was like, I don't really want to do that in the middle of nursing school. I don't really have time to be leaving clinical and stuff to go get monitoring done for different things and labs and all that. So we've decided to bypass the clinical trial at this point. So I asked the nurse practitioner what her plan was, and basically we're going to start from scratch. She's like, obviously, like my surgery, that was important, but now we know I have endometriosis and I've had polyps, but otherwise, she said, we're going to draw your progesterone today, because at that point it was 7 days post-ovulation when you should be getting your blood drawn to see if your progesterone is low. Because she said that my fertility doctor shouldn't have drawn it on day 3 because it would still be too early for it to have started rising. I don't really know. But she said, we'll draw your blood today, we'll check your progesterone. Then on day 3 of your next cycle, you'll get a whole panel done. We're going to check for PCOS. We're going to check for yada yada, all these things, because I haven't had my actual hormones checked since the beginning of all my fertility stuff, besides like the few things that needed to be checked during my treatment. Even after the miscarriage, nothing was checked. After my endometriosis surgery, I wasn't put on birth control. Nothing else was examined. Like, I did my telehealth appointment where she looked at my scars through the screen, and that was it. So I did that blood work that appointment was on the 13th of February. And then I started my period on the 16th. So I did my full blood work panel on the 19th. And she mentioned looking into Clomid or Letrozole, and then if my stuff does come back consistent with PCOS, then we can look into metformin or GLP-1s, depending on how everything looks and what I can afford and things like that. But at this point, I'm very willing to just, like, in my mind, start with the basics of things, which I intended to do all along. I just didn't have the education or the knowledge to know any better. So that's kind of where we're at right now. It's been 3 very long years, and I'm hoping that this can kind of give us the answers we've been looking for. I have a follow-up scheduled, but it will be like the first day of my next period, which would be the 17th. So 2 weeks from today is technically when my follow-up is scheduled. I've been waiting for them to call and tell me that the results have come back, because they did call about my progesterone and told me that it was normal for 7 DPO. So, but anywho, when I originally called to schedule my follow-up appointment, that was the earliest that they had. So I'll either have another appointment in 2 weeks, or I may call tomorrow and see if they have anything before then. I think they said the 11th was available, but I have a lab shift, or like I'm working in the lab that day, and I think the appointment was like after my shift would have started. So I don't know, but that's been my experience so far. It's been interesting, and I'm sure I've missed a few points here and there, but I've been rambling on for an hour now, and I'm really sorry this was such a long video, but I have never like fully sat down and explained to anyone the entirety of the process that we've been through in the last 3 years. So yeah, I watch as many infertility videos as I can stomach sometimes. Like I'll go through phases, watch a whole bunch, and then like get sad and not watch them for a while. But it is nice seeing people going through the things that I'm going through and knowing that I'm not alone. And so I hope that someone watching this can gain that feeling from seeing me talk about this. I have hopes that this is gonna work. Whatever we decide to do, I don't know. I just, like, it's nice to finally feel validated that it wasn't just Adam this whole time. Like, it could have been me as well. It's just also frustrating that I feel like we've wasted so much time avoiding the cause and not trying to fix it, if that makes sense. Because I'm sure that even just fixing these things that could be wrong with me could also just change my quality of life. My first cycle after my IUI was very heavy. It was like slightly concerning, and I was still cramping, which was a little frustrating because I was hoping that they would just magically be gone now that my endometriosis was burned out of me. But yeah, so that is our infertility journey so far. Like I said, I'm sorry that any of you have to be going through this if you are, but I'm glad that we have our little community and we can relate to each other. So if you want to see more content like this, like I said, will make videos about each procedure or my lap and my hysteroscopy. If y'all are interested, just let me know. I do plan on doing other videos besides just fertility stuff, obviously, because I don't want that to be my sole focus, but I wouldn't mind making more videos on this topic in the future. So yeah, hopefully I'm gonna have some crochet stuff coming out soon and some nursing school stuff, but I just felt like this needed to be out there so that way if and when more stuff comes up regarding this topic, you'll have a good idea as to what we've gone through, because we don't, even a lot of people that we're close to don't know exactly like what's been going on. So if you're seeing this and you know me, sup. But alright guys, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.